reading of Joshua, and we will be going through chapter 10. I am outside. This is beautiful. Cat, or you may hear some birds, but I'm hoping our cat will stay down off the table. God bless you and thank you for joining me for today's reading. Joshua chapter 6. And Jericho was shut in, even it was shut in from the face of the sons of Israel, no one going out and no one coming in. And Jehovah said to Joshua, See, I have given Jericho and its king, mighty warriors, into your hand, and you shall go around the city, all the men of battle, going around to the city once. So you shall do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. And on the 7th day you shall go around the city 7 times. And the priests shall blow with the trumpets. And it shall be when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the horn, all the people shall shout with a great shout. And the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall go up, each man in front of him. And Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said to them, Take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of rams' horns before the ark of Jehovah. And he said to the people, Pass on, go around the city, and he who is armed shall go on before the ark of Jehovah. And it happened when Joshua spoke to the people, the 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets of the ram's horns before Jehovah passed on and blew with the trumpets. And the ark of the covenant of Jehovah went after them. And he who was armed went before the priest, blowing the trumpets. And he who gathered up went after the ark, going on and blowing with the trumpets. And Joshua had commanded the people, saying, You shall not shout, nor cause your voice to be heard, nor shall there go from your mouth a word, until the day I say to you, Shout. Then you shall shout. And the ark of Jehovah went around the city, going around one time, and they came into the camp, and remained in the camp. And Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests bore the ark of Jehovah. And 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets of the ram's horns were walking before the ark of Jehovah, going on, and were blowing with the trumpets. And he who was armed went before them, and the rear guard went behind the ark of Jehovah, going on and blowing with the trumpets. And they circled the city on the 2nd day 1 time, and returned to the camp. So they did 6 days. And it happened on the 7th day, they rose early at the dawning of the day, and went around the city 7 times. And it happened at the 7th time, the priests blew with the trumpets, and Joshua said to the people, Shout, for Jehovah has given you the city. And the city shall be devoted to Jehovah, it and all that are in it. Only Rahab the harlot shall live, she and all who are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. And you shall certainly keep clear of the cursed things, that you not become accursed by taking from the cursed things, and shall make the camp of Israel become accursed, and trouble it. And all the silver and gold and vessels of copper and iron, they are holy to Jehovah. They shall come into the treasury of Jehovah. And the people shouted and blew with the trumpets. And it happened, when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, the people shouted a great shout, and the wall fell under it. And the people went up into the city, each man in front of him, and they captured the city. And they destroyed all that was in the city, from man even to woman, from young even to aged, and to ox and sheep and ass, by the mouth of the sword. And Joshua said to the 2 men who had spied out the land, Go into the house of the woman, the harlot, and bring the woman out from there, and all whom she has, as you have sworn to her. And the young men, the spies, went in and brought out Rahab, and her father and her mother and her brothers, and all whom she had. Yes, they brought all her family and set them outside the camp of Israel. And they burned the city with fire, and all that was in it. Only they gave the silver and the gold, and the vessels of copper and of iron to the treasury of the house of Jehovah. And Joshua kept alive Rahab the harlot, and the house of thing is in your midst, O Israel. You are not able to stand before your enemies until you take away her father and all whom she had. And she lives in the midst of Israel to this day, for she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. And at that time Joshua adjured, saying, Cursed be the man who rises up before the face of Jehovah and builds the city of Jericho. He shall lay its foundation in his firstborn, and he shall set up its doors in his youngest son. And Jehovah was with Joshua, and his fame was in all the land. Now I want to go back because I want to make sure that I understand that even after they brought everybody out, what was the deal with her daddy? And Joshua kept alive Rahab the harlot. It was in verse 25. And the house of thing is in your midst, O Israel. You are not able to stand before your enemies until you take away her father. And all whom she had. And she lives in the midst of Israel. All right. This is the interlinear Bible. So let me see what it says right here in the King James so we understand it better. And Joshua saved Rahab the harlot alive, and her father's household, and all that she had. And she dwelt in Israel even unto this day, because she hid the messengers which Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. Okay, that makes you feel better. Chapter 7 of Joshua. And the sons of Israel committed a sin in the cursed thing. All right, it's no different. And Achan the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zorah, and the tribe of Judah took the cursed thing. And the anger of Jehovah glowed against the sons of Israel. And Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai. It's Ai, so I don't know how you want to say that. Ai, which is near Bethaven, on the east of Bethel, and spoke to them, saying, Go up and spy out the land. And the men went up and spied out Ai. And they returned to Joshua, and said to him, Do not let all the people go up. Let about 2,000 men and about 3,000 men go up, and they shall strike Ai. Do not cause all the people to labor there, for they are few. And about 3,000 men of the people went up there, and they fled before the men of Ai. And the man of Ai struck about 36 men of them, and pursued them before the gate of Sherebim. And they struck them in the desert, and the heart of the people was melted and became as water. And Joshua tore his garments and fell on his face to the earth before the ark of the covenant, until the evening, he and the elders of Israel, and they threw dust on their heads. And Joshua said, O Lord Jehovah, why have you at all caused this people to cross over the Jordan to give us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us? And oh, that we have been willing, and that we had dwelt beyond the Jordan, O Lord. What shall I say after Israel has turned its back before its enemies? And the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land shall hear, and shall come around against us, and shall cut off our name out of the earth. And what shall you do for your great name? And Jehovah said to Joshua, Get up, Why do you fall on your face this way? Israel has sinned, and they also have transgressed my covenant which I commanded them, and have also taken to the cursed things, and have also stolen, and also deceived, and also put it among their stuff. And the sons of Israel have not been able to stand before their enemies. They have turned the back before their enemies, because they have become cursed. I will not be with you again, if you do not destroy the cursed things from among you. Rise up, sanctify the people, and you shall say, Sanctify yourselves for tomorrow. For so says Jehovah, the God of Israel, a cursed thing from among you. And you shall be brought near in the morning by your tribes, and it shall be, the tribe which Jehovah takes shall draw near by families, and the family which Jehovah takes shall draw near by households, and the household which Jehovah takes shall draw near by men. And it shall be, he who is taken with the accursed thing shall be burned with fire, he and all that he has, because he has transgressed the covenant of Jehovah, and because he has committed folly in Israel. And Joshua rose up early in the morning and brought Israel near by its tribes. And the tribe of Judah was taken. And he brought the family of Judah near, and he took the family of Zarchites, and he brought near the family of Zarchites by men. And Zabdi was taken, and he brought near his household by men Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah was taken. And Joshua said to Achan, My son, I beg you, give glory to Jehovah the God of Israel, and give thanks to him, and please tell me what you have done. Do not hide it from me. And Achan answered Joshua and said, Truly I have sinned against Jehovah the God of Israel, and this I have done. When I saw among the spoil of Shinar, and 200 shekels of silver, and a wedge of gold, one of 50 shekels in weight. Then I lusted after them, and took them. And behold, they are hidden in the earth, in the middle of my tent, and silver under it. And Joshua sent messengers, and they ran to the tent, and behold, it was hidden in his tent, and silver under it. And they took them out in the middle of the tent, and brought them to Joshua and to all the sons of Israel, and laid them out before Jehovah. As Joshua and all Israel with him took Achan the son of Zerah, and the silver, and the robe, and the wedge of gold, and his sons, and his daughters, and his oxen, and his ass, and his flock, and his tent, and all that he had, and they made them go up to the valley of Achor. Joshua said, How you have troubled us! Jehovah shall trouble you today. And all Israel threw stones at him, and they burned them with fire, and they stoned them with stones, and they raised over him a great heap of stones to this day. And Jehovah turned back from the heat of his anger. On this account, the name of that place is the Valley of Grief until this day. Joshua chapter 8. And Jehovah said to Joshua, Do not fear, nor be afraid. Take all the people of war with you, and rise up. Go up to Ai. Behold, I have given the king of Ai and his people, and his city and its land into your hand. And you shall do to Ai and to its king as you have done to Jericho and its king. Only its spoil and its cattle you shall take for yourselves. Set yourself an ambush for the city behind it. And Joshua rose up, and all the people of war, to go up to Ai. And Joshua chose 30,000 men, mighty warriors, and sent them away by night. And he commanded them, saying, See, you will be in ambush against the city at the rear of the city. You shall not go very far off from the city, and all of you shall be ready. And I and all the people with me shall draw near to the city. And it shall be, when they come out to meet us as at the first, and we have fled before them, and they have come out after us until we have drawn them out of the city. For they will say, They are fleeing before us, as at the first, and we are fleeing from them. Then you shall rise from the ambush, and shall occupy the city. And Jehovah your God shall give it into your hand. And it shall be, when you capture the city, you shall burn the city with fire. You shall do according to the word of Jehovah. See, I have commanded you. And Joshua sent them away, And they went to the ambush and stayed between Bethel and Ai, on the west of Ai. And Joshua remained that night in the midst of the people. Joshua rose early in the morning and inspected the people, and went up, he and the elders of Israel, in the sight of the people of Ai. And all the people of war with him went up and drew near and came before the city. And they camped on the north of Ai, and the valley was between him and Ai. And he took about 5,000 men and set them as an ambush between Bethel and Ai on the west of the city. And they set the people, all the camp, on the north of the city, and its rear on the west of the city. And Joshua went into the middle of the valley on that night. And it happened when the king of Ai saw the men of the city rose early and hurried to go out to meet Israel in battle, he and all his people, at the appointed time before the plain. He did not know that an ambush was against him behind the city. And Joshua and all Israel appeared stricken before them and fled the way of the wilderness. And all the people in the city were called to chase them. And they pursued Joshua and were drawn away out of the city. And there was not a man left in Ai and Bethel who had not gone out after Israel. And they left the city open and chased Israel. And Jehovah said to Joshua, stretch out the javelin in your hand toward Ai, for I will give it into your hand. And Joshua stretched out the javelin in his hand toward the city, and the ambush rose up quickly out of their place, and they ran as soon as he had stretched out his hand and entered the city and took it. And they hastened and burned the city with fire. And the men of Ai looked behind them and saw, and behold, the smoke of the city had gone up into the sky, and there was no power in them to flee here or there. And the people who had fled to the wilderness turned back against the pursuers. And Joshua and all Israel saw that the ambush had captured the city, and that the smoke of the city had gone up, and they turned back and struck the men of Ai. And the others came out from the city to meet them, and they were in the midst of Israel, some on this side and some on that. And they struck them until he did not leave them a survivor, not one that escaped. And they caught the king of Ai alive, and brought him to Joshua. And it happened when Israel had made an end to slaying all the inhabitants of Ai in the field, even in the wilderness, where they pursued them. And they all of them, fell by the mouth of the sword, until they were consumed. All Israel turned back to Ai, and struck it with the mouth of the sword. And all who fell during that day of men and women were 12,000. All the men of Ai. And Joshua did not draw back his hand, with which he stretched out the javelin, until he had destroyed all the inhabitants of Ai. Only Israel seized for themselves the livestock and the plunder of the city, according to the word of Jehovah, which he commanded Joshua. And Joshua burned Ai, and made it a heap forever, a desolation to this day. And he hanged the king of Ai on the tree until evening time. And at sundown Joshua commanded, and they took his dead body down from the tree, and threw it into the opening of the gate of the city, and raised over it a great heap of stones until this day. Then Joshua built an altar to Jehovah, the God of Israel, in Mount Ebal, as Moses the servant of Jehovah commanded the son of Israel, as it is written in the book of the law of Moses, an altar of whole stones, on which had been wielded no iron. And they offered up on it burnt offerings to Jehovah, and offered peace offerings. And he wrote there on the stones the copy of the law of Moses, which he had written in the presence of the sons of Israel. And all Israel and its elders and authorities and its judges were standing on this side and on that of the ark before the priest, the Levites who bore the ark of the covenant of Jehovah, the alien as well as the homeborn, half of them in front of Mount Gerizim, and half of them in front of Mount Abel, as Moses the servant of Jehovah had commanded at the first, that they should bless the people of Israel. And afterward he read all the words of the law, the blessing and the curse, according to all that was written in the book of the law. There was not a word of all that Moses commanded which Joshua did not read before all the assembly of Israel, and the women, and the little ones, and the aliens that walked among them. Chapter 9 of Joshua. And it happened when all the kings who were beyond the Jordan, in the hills, and in the lowland, and in all the coast of the great sea, in front of Lebanon, heard of it, the Hittite and the Amorite, and the Canaanite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite, they with one mouth gathered themselves to fight with Joshua and with Israel. And the inhabitants of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and to Ai, and they acted slyly. And they went and acted like envoys, and took old sacks for their asses, and old wineskins, even torn and bound up, and old and patched sandals on their feet, and old garments on them. And all their provision of bread was dry, it was crumbs. And they went to Joshua to the camp of Gilgal. And they said to him and to the men of Israel, We have come from a distant land, and now cut a covenant with us. And the men of Israel said to the Hivites, Perhaps you are living in our midst, and how shall we cut a covenant with you? And they said to Joshua, We are your servants. And Joshua said to them, Who are you? And from where do you come? And they said to him, Your servants have come from a very distant land, because of the name of Jehovah your God, for we have heard of his fame and all that he has done in Egypt, also what he has done to the two kings of the Amorites beyond the Jordan, to Sihon the king of Heshbon, and to Og the king of Bashan, who was Ashtaroth. And our elders and all the people of our land spoke to us, saying, Take provisions in your hand for the way, and go to meet them. And you shall say to them, We are your servants, and now cut a covenant with us. We provided ourselves with this hot bread out of our houses on the day we came out to go to you, and now behold, it is dry, and it is crumbs. And these are the wineskins which we filled new, and behold, they have torn. And these garments of ours and our sandals have become old because of the exceeding greatness of the way. And the men took of their provision and did not ask at the mouth of Jehovah. And Joshua made peace with them and cut a covenant with them to keep them alive. And the leaders of the congregation swore to them. And at the end of 3 days they had cut a covenant with them. And it happened that they heard that they were their neighbors, and they were living in their midst. And the sons of Israel joined and came to their cities on the 3rd day. And their cities were Gibeon, and Chephirah, and Beeroth, and Kirjath-jearim. And the sons of Israel did not strike them, for the leaders of the congregation swore to them by Jehovah the God of Israel. And all the congregation murmured against the leaders. And all the leaders said to all the congregation, We have sworn to them by Jehovah the God of Israel, and now we cannot touch them. We shall do this to them, and shall keep them alive, and wrath shall not be on us because of the oath which we have sworn to them. And the leaders said to them, They shall live and be woodcutters and drawers of water for all the congregation. And the leaders spoke to them. And Joshua called for them, and he spoke to them, saying, Why have you deceived us, saying, We are very far from you, yet you are living in our midst? And now you are cursed, and none of you shall fail to be slaves, and woodcutters, and drawers of water for the house of my God. And they answered Joshua and said, Because it was certainly told to your servants what Jehovah your God commanded his servant Moses, to give you all the land, and to destroy all the inhabitants. Prayed for. And now behold, we are in your hand. Do whatever is good and is right in your eyes to do. And he did so to them, and delivered them from the hand of the sons of Israel. And they did not kill them. And on that day Joshua made them woodcutters and drawers of water for the congregation, and for the altar of Jehovah, at the place which he should choose to this day. Chapter 10 of Jericho. And it happened when Adonizedek. I don't know. Adonizedek. I didn't say it right. King of Jerusalem, heard that Ai and had destroyed it, king. So he had done to Ai and to her king, and that the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were in their midst. They were greatly afraid, because Gibeon was a great city, like one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all its men were mighty. And Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, sent to Hoham, king of Hebron, and to Piram, king of Jarmuth, and to Zaphiah, king of Lachish, and to Debar, king of Eglon, saying, Come up to me and help me, and we shall strike Gibeon, for it has made peace with Joshua and with the sons of Israel. And the 5 kings of the Amorites assembled, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, the king of Eglon, they and all their camps, and they camped against Gibeon and fought against it. And the men of Gibeon sent to Joshua and to the camp of Gilgal, saying, Do not withdraw your hand from your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us and help us, for all the kings of the Amorites living in the hills have gathered against us. And Joshua went up to Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him, even all the mighty warriors. And Jehovah said to Joshua, Do not be afraid of them, for I have given them into your hands. Not a man of them shall stand before you. And Joshua came to them suddenly. He had traveled all night from Gilgal, and Jehovah troubled them before Israel, and struck them with a great slaughter at Gibeon. And he pursued by the way of the ascent of Betharon, and struck them to Azekah, and to Makkedah. And it happened, as they fled from the face of Israel, they were in the descent of Beth-horon. Even Jehovah cast great stones on them out of the heavens to Azekah, and they died. The many who died by the hailstones were more than the sons of Israel had killed by the sword. Then Joshua spoke to Jehovah in the day when Jehovah gave the Amorites up before the sons of Israel. And he said, Sun, stand still before the eyes of Israel in Gibeon, and moon, stand still in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stood still, until the nation was avenged on its foes. Is it not written in the book of the upright? Yea, the sun stood still in the middle of the heavens, and did not hasten to go down for a full day. And there has not been a day such as that before it or after it, for Jehovah listened to the voice of a man. For Jehovah fought for Israel, and Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, to the camp at Gilgal. And these 5 kings fled and were hidden in a cave at Makkedah. And it was told to Joshua, saying, The 5 kings have been found hidden in a cave at Makkedah. And Joshua said, Roll great stones to the mouth of the cave, and set men over it to watch them. And you do not stand still. Pursue your enemies, and you shall strike the hindmost of them. Do not allow them to go into their cities, for Jehovah your God has given them into your hand. And it happened when Joshua the sons of Israel had finished destroying them with a very great blow, until they were completely destroyed, and the remnant of them who escaped went into the fortified cities, that all the people returned to the camp in peace. To Joshua at Makkedah, not one sharpened his tongue against the sons of Israel, against any man. And Joshua said, Open the mouth of the cave, and bring out to me these 5 kings from the cave. And they did so, and brought out to him these 5 kings from the cave, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon. And it happened when they brought out these kings to Joshua, Joshua called to every man of Israel, and said to the commanders of the men of war who had gone with him, Draw near, set your feet on the necks of these kings. And they drew near, and set their feet on their necks. And Joshua said to them, Do not fear, nor be afraid. Be strong and brave. For so Jehovah shall do to all your enemies with whom you are fighting. And afterward Joshua struck them, and put them to death, and hung them on 5 trees. And they were hanging on the trees until the evening. And it happened at the time of the going of the sun, Joshua commanded, and they took them down from the trees, and threw them into the cave where they had been hidden, and put great stones on the mouth of the cave until this very day. And that day Joshua captured Makkedah, and he struck it by the mouth of the sword, and he destroyed its king, them and every person in it. He did not survivor, and he did to the king of Makkedah as he did to the king of Jericho. And Joshua passed on, and all Israel with him, from Makkedah to Libnah. And he fought with Libnah. And Jehovah also gave it into the hand of Israel and its king. And they struck it by the mouth of the sword, and every person in it. He did not leave the survivor in it. And he did to its king as he did to the king of Jericho. And Joshua passed on. I got to show y'all. My grandbaby, I am outside because I knew that he would hear me reading. So look, I'm just going to show you. Could you see him walking? He hears Mimi's voice. He hadn't been here 3 days. And he is coming. Sock feet and all. Children and grandchildren are a blessing from the Most High. He's coming up, so I'm gonna get to show you again. Joshua passed on, and all Israel with him, from Libnah to Lachish, and they camped against it and fought against it. And Jehovah gave Lachish into the hand of Israel, and he captured it on the 2nd day, and struck it by the mouth of the sword, and every person in it according to all that he did to Libnah. Then Haran the king of Gezer came up to help Lachish, and Joshua struck him and his people until there was not left to him a survivor. And Joshua passed on, and all Israel with him, from Lachish to Eglon, and they camped against it and fought against it, and captured it on that day, and struck it with the mouth of the sword. And he destroyed every person in it on that day, according to all that he did to Lachish. And Joshua went on, and all Israel with him, from Eglon to Hebron, and they fought against it, and captured it, struck it by the mouth of the sword, and its king, and all its cities, and every person in it. He did not leave a survivor, according to all that he did to Eglon, and destroyed it, and every person in it. And Joshua returned to all Israel with him to Debir, and fought against it, and they captured it and its king, and all its cities, and they struck them by the mouth of the sword, and destroyed every person in it. He did not leave a survivor, as he did to Hebron, so he did to Debir and to its king, even as he did to Libnah and to its king. And Joshua struck all the land, the heights and Negeb, and the lowland, and the slopes, and all their kings. He did not leave a survivor, but he destroyed all that breathed, as Jehovah the God of Israel had commanded. And Joshua struck them from Kadesh Barnea even to Gaza, and all the land of Goshen even to Gibeon. And Joshua captured all these kings in their land at one time. For Jehovah, the God of Israel, fought for Israel. And Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, to the camp of Gilgal. It's good to see where he went I think he went back he's on the porch area with Papa. But wasn't that pleasant? God bless each and every one of you. And join me again for our daily reading. Tomorrow we will be in Joshua chapter 11. And we do see how, Joshua knew what happened to Moses and to Aaron because they were disobedient. And so how much more important it is that Joshua, by this time, all the people of the lands are multiplying, I'm sure, exponentially, like just, sons and daughters being born. And I think about modern day and how we are today. Because the Bible relates to today. If a city, because you know how cities used to be long ago, rural areas like they are today, some rural areas. When you come into a certain area, sometimes people do not welcome you in when they do not know you into a smaller rural area. That's what we find here in Tennessee. It depends on the cities. There's so many of different backgrounds and different families and people. It's still true to that if you know somebody, then things are a little easier. But when you come into a place where you don't know somebody, it's harder to get a job, maybe harder to find a place to live. It could be harder to buy a car, depending on, your finances may play a lot into that, meaning that if you got the money, then it doesn't matter. But what I'm saying is, Joshua knew not to be mixing with evil men. He also knew that the Lord God, Jehovah, had told him, I'm going to allow you to capture these cities, but you're not going to allow people to stay alive. Now, I do know that there are some people that I've met in my own families, they do not believe that the Lord would say destroy man, woman, child, everybody. But he did, because see, there was cultural worship and living that did not mix with the things of Jehovah, false gods, and they allowed their people basically to do whatever. Sometimes, well, we see that today. We see that it's harder and harder to find like-minded individuals that are not just follow the ways of God. Now, I will say this. A lot of people say that they believe in the Lord. They believe in God. But then they want God to accept everything that they do. And when we read God's Word, it's not that way, brothers and sisters. We're on the obeying side, not God. God doesn't compromise. He doesn't conform to what we think. It's what He thinks that we have to conform to. The study in the Word, because basically reading, but the more we have read the Bible, because this is not the first time I've ever read the Bible, even on this channel, even on the other channel. This is probably the third time I have read through the Bible. This time I'm reading through the Interlinear Bible, which is an older kind of translation. But we should study to show ourselves approved, so that the days that we have remaining, that we become more and more Christ-like. Amen? So what I was saying was that if men of generations past had stuck to when somebody enters into your midst and they do not represent everything that you believe in, if those people were pushed out, I'm not saying killed like Joshua was told, but if they were pushed out of that city, because see, I have seen that before. People not feeling welcomed, so they leave. What's happened in our modern day society is that we've accepted everything, and as long as it doesn't affect you, then it's okay. But that's not biblical. We are a set apart people, and we are set apart to serve God and to serve man. We love man, but we do not love the sin. We are not partakers of their rituals or their cultural behaviors that go against God's words. Amen? Well, I love you, and I thank you for joining me in the daily reading, because we have to do the due diligence and seek God every day. That's how we remain faithful and strong. I also want to say that, please, if you have not subscribed to Lighting the Way Ministries, it is the featured channel of God's Handmaiden, and Lighting the Way Ministries is the ministry channel. And every evening at 6 p.m. Central, we join together for a solemn assembly of prayer. There's a study in the Word 2 times a week with Brother John, my husband, and that is at 8 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday nights and Sunday evenings. And as the Lord allows, there will be more ministry, more programming available, because brothers and sisters, not only has the Lord led to do something like that, but brothers and sisters would benefit from it. So just God bless you abundantly and keep you this day. Father, I pray ministering angels to always go before and after your children. In Jesus' name, amen.